Right, but there's this camera.
Let's begin. I want to introduce Paul Viminitz. Now, Paul says many, many sensible things and says them backed up with cogent arguments. But he has this tendency in saying sensible things to say them in inflammatory ways. He thinks his ideas are more outrageous than they in fact are. It's just the mode of presentation is sometimes fools people. Paul is a philosophy professor at Lethbridge, at the University of Lethbridge. Been there for many years, I guess 20.
Too long.
He's been there too long. He's been a friend of Saf's for quite a while as well. So join me in welcoming Paul Viminitz.
Thank you very much. And thanks to Mark for having me. Listen, freedom of speech is not about my right to speak my mind. If it were, that right could be readily honored by just driving me out to a farmer's field somewhere just outside of town and leave me there for an hour to howl at the moon or whatever. Pick me up an hour later. Right? So my freedom of speech belongs not to me. It belongs to you. It's your freedom to hear what's on my mind, conditional, of course, on my willingness to share it with you. But academic freedom inverts that conditionality. As an academic, I have a duty to share what's on my mind, conditional on your willingness to hear it. So in our view, on Saf's view, no one has the right to interfere in my fulfilling that duty, unless. And it's that unless I want us to think about together this morning, some of which we've already considered, right, with these, unless conditions, right? Now, as Wittgenstein observed, if a lion could speak, we wouldn't understand him. And given the very different worlds we live in, neither could we understand Torquemada. But we do ourselves a disservice by regarding those who would silence us incomprehensible. They're not. And they're not entirely without good reasons. They are perfectly aware that acting on those reasons has the anticipated autonomous effect of thwarting academic freedom. But, on their view, those good reasons trump. Let's test our own commitment to academic freedom being categorical. Consider the following conjecture. Okay? This is not my conjecture, by the way. Okay? I just want to make it clear. Okay?
This is going to be good.
This is not my conjecture. Let me repeat that into the mic, wherever it is, okay? However, no, quite seriously, this is not my conjecture, but it's something that's actually in the wind, believe it or not. Human beings have been practicing animal husbandry almost since we came down from the trees. It should come as no surprise, therefore, that when sending a pair of slaves to the breeding hut, their owners want to select for the properties most useful to them: strength and biddability. And say for the house nigger, I said the word.
We noticed.
We noticed. I hope, okay. Anything but intelligence. By contrast, the Ashkenazi Jew was self-selected for little more than intelligence. Hence, Woody Allen. I mean, come on, not exactly macho, studly, kind of, okay. This is not the guy you want picking your cotton, okay? Now, this conjecture is probably false, okay? But what if it were widely accepted as true, which for much of the last half millennia it was? What would be the implications for the allocation of scarce educational resources? So truth and social justice, as thus conceived, are often incompatible. Pick one or the other and live with it. But, as H.L.A. Hart would argue, hard cases make bad law, and trolley problems like this make for bad moral principles. So I want to walk us through what I hope will prove to be a more paradigmatic case of this kind of collateral damage. As we walk through it, I ask you, so I need your cooperation in this, right? At each juncture, to replace each step I'll be taking with the isomorphic step taken in your case, whether your case be Tony Hall being suspended for just suggesting that 9/11 might have been a Mossad operation, or Francis Widdowson for suggesting that indigenous exceptionalism infantilizes rather than respects, or Ben Shapiro being, okay, I'm not proud of all of our people, okay? Ben Shapiro being castigated for suggesting that trans women are not women, or countless academics being called to the carpet, some of whom are here today, by the way, as I was, for answering a question when a student recently arrived from Afghanistan asked, to what does the N-word refer? Think about it. He's from Afghanistan, recently arrived, right? He turns to me, because, I said, with the N-word, what is the N-word? Like, what am I supposed to say? I can't tell you. It's stupid, right? Okay. As I say, attend if you can simultaneously to the case I put on offer and to whichever of those above mentioned cases or most exercises you. If I've done my job right, then they should run in perfect parallel. So I'm going to, from time to time, be reminding you, okay, remember, this is not about Holocaust denial, necessarily. It's about other things. Okay. Imagine having to prove to the court that before they were brought down that Tuesday morning, those twin towers were real, not holographs. It's not that it couldn't be done, but some people actually believe the twin towers were holographs. They always have been. It's not that it couldn't be done. It's that if it had to be done, our judicial system would come to a complete standstill. We can imagine a circumstance under which some such assumption has to be made explicit. In doing so, the court would be taking what's called a judicial notice. But judicial notice is not the same as a res judicata being Latin for a matter that's been decided, right? By the latter is meant something that's already been, 4 years of Latin comes in handy, I think mine was the last generation that actually studied Latin in high school. The taking of judicial notice, by contrast, is always open to challenge. This is why lawmakers have always been reluctant to make dissemination of a falsehood as such, for example, that the Holocaust is a Zionist myth, a criminal offense. For even if the court took judicial notice of it, being open to challenge would expose the historicity of the Holocaust to the risk of falling within rather than beyond a reasonable doubt. So instead, the law has opted to criminalize incitement. Not incitement to violence, but just to hatred. And then trust the courts to do their part by taking judicial notice, not of the Holocaust itself, which, by the way, the Canadian courts have never acknowledged, right? But of its denial being a species of inciting hatred. So it's the lateral move, right? It's that side move, right? How would one go about showing that Holocaust denial does not incite hatred? By showing that it's never been shown that it does. But according to most courts, it doesn't need to be any more than it needs to be shown that the Twin Towers weren't holographs. As it happens, it never has been shown that Holocaust denial incites hatred, nor that hatred, at least of itself, should be actionable under our liberal conception of actionability. But all that, apparently, is irrelevant. So what we have, it would seem, is what we might call constructive criminalization of Holocaust denial, any real or imagined incitement of hatred being neither here nor there. The law is no stranger to adopting a legal fiction to achieve what it's loath to achieve more directly, and in some cases, and perhaps this is one of them, rightly so. But if rightly so, then I think we have to rethink our knee-jerk condemnation of those jurisdictions, mostly but not exclusively Muslim, that have made blasphemy a criminal offense, in some cases punishable by death. If Holocaust denial is blasphemy, And if we think blasphemy should not be criminalized, then neither should Holocaust denial be criminalized, including by this sleight of hand. That Holocaust denial is blasphemy. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to give the opposition the most credible, principle of charity, the most credible line of argument available. Right? That Holocaust denial is blasphemy may seem a stretch, but bear with me while I try to make the case that it is. Okay? So that's the game we're going to play right now. All renates are chordates, and all chordates are, I hope I'm right about this, Leslie. All renates are chordates, and all chordates are renates, right? Okay. But they're not the same thing. If they were, I could as readily have seen a nephrologist after my heart attack, or a cardiologist for this trouble I'm having peeing, right? Likewise, even if all and only Swedes were Lutherans, Swede is a nationality, whereas Lutheranism is a religion. But Jews aren't just coextensive with also being Jewish. To be a Jew just is to be Jewish. Moreover, being Jewish is not a nationality. Some Jews are black, some, go figure, are Han Chinese. But nor is it a religion. 70% of Jews, myself included, are atheists. So what the hell is it? Put 2 Jews in a room and you've got at least 4 opinions on this or any other question. But let me, that's because for everyone, it's on the one hand, but on the other, it helps to say this with a Yiddish accent, right? But let me offer you one of mine. The other I'll say for when one's refuted. This one's refuted. To be a Jew is to take oneself, and for others to so take her, to be the inheritor of a covenant struck between a God named Yahweh, who probably doesn't exist, and a man named Abraham, who probably didn't either. Most myths have a grain of truth to them, but even if this one doesn't, it doesn't matter. This is a myth that kept a people together as a people through thick and thin, and a lot of thin, for 3,200 years. That's a lot more that can be said for any of the truths about 9/11, of global warming, Donald Trump, truths that have only driven us into mutual vilification and intolerance. The myth of the covenant is the soteriological element in our theology. Soteriology refers to the theory of salvation, right? Okay. What serves that role for Americans are the huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Americans have their Mayflower. Our foundation myth is the Exodus. For martyrs, Texans have the Alamo. We have Masada and the Warsaw Ghetto. And like Valley Forge, we too have our against all odds, stories like David versus Goliath, the wars of 1948, 56, 67, 73, and of course, Entebbe. But a people also needs a sense of entitlement to its providence. In fact, those who came from Tennessee to the Alamo were defending slavery. They wanted to make Texas, that they knew was going to become an American state eventually, to be a slave state. Mexico had long since abolished it, by the way, right? But freedom seemed a more noble rallying cry. The Americans have their Boston Tea Party and Manifest Destiny, and the Afrikaners too thought they were fulfilling God's will on earth. What do we have? We have the Abrahamic covenant. A covenant is a voluntary exchange of value for value between dual equals. The terms of the covenant are these. For my part, said God. For my part, said God. No. Yeah. She who is. Okay, hang on. For my part, said God, I shall cause your people, your children, to be as numerous as the stars, and for yours you shall go forth and be an example unto the nations. Okay. The children's memorial at Yad Vashem is a silent fuck you to this feckless God for not having kept his side of the bargain. But even post-Auschwitz, to assure our side of it would make us no longer Jews. Those who remain in diaspora regard themselves covenant-bound to serve as example in the nations, whereas Zionists interpret our mandate as our being an example as a nation. If they're right, Noam Chomsky and I don't think much of the example Israel is setting. Judaism has no denominations, but yes, the treatment of the Palestinians does divide us. To be fair, the Zionists have the Bible on their side. Our scriptures take great pains to justify the ethnic cleansing of Canaan, and if we're once again to have a homeland, we need to feel as justified today as the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. This is because after 2,000 years in diaspora, God gave this land to me, rings a bit thin when in the meantime he's given it to someone else. A new nation needs an equally new foundation myth. So if the Nazis hadn't provided us one, we'd have to invent something akin to it ourselves. Thus, insofar as the Holocaust is now an ineluctable constituent of our Jewishness, Holocaust denial is by definition blasphemy. It's equivalent to mocking the empty tomb, or claiming Muhammad and Joseph Smith were just very savvy con men. So if we think it reasonable to criminalize Holocaust denial, why do we think it unreasonable for the Ayatollah to have issued a fatwa against Salman Rushdie? Blasphemy, not to mention apostasy, remains, or in some cases has only recently become, a criminal offense in 77 countries. I had written 71 countries, but I have a research assistant who keeps me afloat in my, it's my wife, by the way, Pam over there.
Some figures are 77, 79.
Oh, God, now it's up to 79, right?
It's all of the 198 countries that were surveyed.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's about 4 in every 10.
Okay, including some in Europe, by the way. Understanding why isn't rocket science. By theocracy is meant not ruled by God. If he exists, he's probably watching Friends reruns. But ruled by whoever represents God, be it the Ayatollah, the Führer, or the great leader, and or whatever divine providence is being assured us, be it the inevitability of our victory or the righteousness of our cause. Theocracy doesn't go away. It just changes its robes. Either you hate Satan or you hate God. Either you're against the terrorists or you're with them. Blasphemy inflicts two equally grievous injuries on a polity. For those exposed to it, it undermines the authority of and solidarity with the state. But it also does the same to the blasphemer herself. The latter is as important as the former. The idea that suppression can only exacerbate dissent is often the swan song of those about to be crushed. Long before Orwell's 1984 and the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, Blaise Pascal understood how this works. If you say it over and over and over and over again, he counseled, eventually you'll believe it. But if you can't say it, eventually you can't think it. That's how it becomes unthinkable for Christians that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were getting it on, or for Muslims and that Muhammad was a pedophile, or for Jews that the diary of Anne Frank was a forgery. I don't know how many of you have actually heard of this. There's this huge literature about the diary of Anne Frank. I didn't know this until, again, my damn researcher, you know. Apparently, there's this huge literature on the diary of Anne Frank being a forgery. I didn't know. Right? But why do we need these things to be unthinkable? Is it because otherwise we become ungovernable? Yes. But also because otherwise we can't govern each other. That's why there's so much support for these blasphemy and apostasy laws in these 77 or 79 countries. Right? The people of 77 countries can't all be wrong, and they're not. Let's consider what would happen if it were not a criminal offense in Turkey to assert the Armenian genocide, which, by the way, criminal offense in Turkey to assert, criminal offense in France to deny the Armenian genocide. So you wonder, like, okay, what's the impediment to Turkey joining the EU? Everything the state has ever done, everything it may be about to do, would fall under withering scrutiny. Under denazification, the German people had no choice about acknowledging the Holocaust. The whole country was a re-education camp. This is why nationalism has been a much harder sell in Germany than in any of its victim nations. And so it's no coincidence that those who do try to sell neo-Nazism take aim at Holocaust orthodoxy first. Now, we can understand why Holocaust denial among Jews might undermine the Zionist program. Zionists need us to feel insecure among the nations. But why do they need the nations to ratify that insecurity? The standard explanation is that we need to cathect Christian guilt to buttress international support for the State of Israel. But I find this unconvincing. The Balfour Declaration was issued in 1917, 2.5 decades before the Wannsee Conference. The Wannsee Conference, for those of you who don't know, is the conference January 1942, in which the final solution to the Jewish question was decided. The Jews were going to get their homeland in any case, and now that they have it, suppose the Holocaust was revealed as a hoax tomorrow morning. How would that revelation endanger a state which, even if it weren't a nuclear power, has proven itself in 4 wars and counting as pretty much invincible? I conclude, perhaps too quickly, that Holocaust orthodoxy can be challenged with no harm done to Jews in Israel, nor to Jews still in diaspora, like myself. Now, I've often remarked that a brutalized people become brutal, and that what happened to the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto is perhaps paid forward onto the Palestinians in Gaza. But any revelation that the Jews of Europe weren't as brutalized as the Steven Spielberg version of events would have it, would have no effect whatsoever on the treatment of Palestinians. Why not? Because, as I've written elsewhere, human beings are animals. Animals compete for territory. Antarctica aside, there isn't a square inch on this planet that hasn't seen one people exterminated, colonized, or displaced by another. And sometimes, when one people displaces another, the second ends up displacing a third. It's the way God intended it to be. And even if it isn't, it's the way it has to be. Why? Because if the sons and daughters of slaves got back on the boats that brought them here, they'd be colonizing Africa. And if you and I got back on the boats that brought us here, we'd be colonizing Europe. So we Jews don't need the Holocaust, nor do our friends need to give it to us. And yet in Israel proper and in every corner of the diaspora, there are organizations whose sole job it is to constantly monitor the air for even a whiff of Holocaust denial, and to see to it, by whatever means necessary, that it's immediately snuffed out. Why? Is it because Holocaust denial promotes anti-Semitism? If anything, it's the other way around. If you're already an anti-Semite, you'll suspect us of all kinds of skullduggery, from celebrating Passover by drinking the blood of a recently baptized Christian baby, that's my favorite, to the protocols of the Elders of Zion, to 9/11, to faking the moon landing, none of which is true, well, except for the bit about Passover. But that was in confidence. Okay? But how does one get from our having manufactured the Holocaust to being the rightful recipients of hatred? If anything, I'd have thought we'd be admired for our chutzpah. So I think there has to be something else going on here, but what? Jews have decided that membership in the race must be inherited from the mother because the milkman always gets in there. In my case, the milkman must have been a Philistine. Because for me, what to believe is strictly a function of dinner invitations. Because I've been critical of the state of Israel, I get very few dinner invitations from the small Jewish community in the city in which I live. But I don't care, because Jews can't cook. I'm sorry, Rhoda. I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
Anecdotal evidence.
Yeah. My Gentile friends can. But they wouldn't be my friends much longer if I came out as a Holocaust denier. Monica Schaefer, most of you know that Monica Schaefer is the Holocaust denier that is a Holocaust denier, and she looks borderline anorexic. Pam and I actually had Monica Schaefer, we have this series called the Guess Who's Coming to Dinner series, and we invited the woman to our table, you know. She must have weighed like 40 pounds, you know. She's just, you know. That's what you get for denying the Holocaust. No real. If you think the madrasas do a number on Muslim kids, try 6 years of Hebrew school. In the madrasa, they at least memorized the Quran. All we learned were the names of concentration camps. But this indoctrination aside, I've done no research whatsoever into the Holocaust. For fear of what I might find and then have to forget? Perhaps. But I think there's something deeper. I think it's the fear of what I won't find. And then, because I'm trained to be a knee-jerkily suspicious of my own confirmation bias, I'd have to keep looking until I do. Is my refusal to even look at the Holocaust literature epistemic sloth? Of course it is. But it's motivated epistemic sloth. This is what Dr. Pinker was talking about, right? Motivated irrationality, right? And it's defensively motivated by the example of those who've gone down some rabbit hole never to return, because for every dead end, there's a direction not yet taken. I've seen this with climate change asserters and deniers, with my 9/11 truther friends, and with friends who are truthers about the truthers. For anyone who's down a rabbit hole, it's often follow the money, or the hermeneutics of suspicion, i.e., in whose interest is it? Of course, it's always in someone's interest to hide the truth, but it doesn't follow that what they're hiding is the truth. But that's precisely what they want you to think. And so on and on it goes, deeper and deeper into the always fertile soil of could-be land. Is there a fact of the matter about climate change? 9/11 and the Holocaust? Of course there is. Are each of these facts important to someone? Clearly, yes. Are any of these facts important to everyone? Obviously not. Would the indisputable discovery of one of these facts move the earth under anyone's feet? Physically, no. Metaphorically, yes. How much of my web of belief, to use W.V.O. Quine's phrase, would I have to revise to accommodate the discovery that the Holocaust never happened? Probably a great deal. But that would be work. And the brain uses 20%, again, my researcher. The brain uses 20% of the body's glucose intake. No, it ain't gonna happen, certainly not on my watch. And you're not gonna do it either. I'll venture that there isn't a single one of you who doesn't believe in the Holocaust. But be honest, how much honest epistemic toil have you put into this heartfelt belief? Not one whit. Having just challenged you, how much have I prodded you into putting it into, even now, to salvage your epistemic dignity? Not one whit. I could ask the same about your views on climate change, or on vaccination safety, or on whether there was a second gunman on the grassy knoll. There was, by the way. I was 13 at the time, but it was the perfect cover. Okay. And here's the thing. I've confessed this in writing with sign, right? The thing about, it's like the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he doesn't exist. The greatest frustration the devil has suffered is not being able to convince the world that he exists. And nobody believes that. I was this. But that would be another paper. My point is not to question your intellectual integrity. Rather, it's to ask, what is intellectual integrity? Question we've been raised all day today. And to argue that it can't be to go down every rabbit hole into which someone else might invite you. I answer to my muse. Monica Schaefer has answered to hers. Are we to tell her I can, but she can't? If what she thinks she's discovered violates what Section 1 of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms calls reasonable limits, demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society, then perhaps we can. But Holocaust denial doesn't do that. We're told that the Battle of Hastings took place in 1066. I've been to Hastings. I've examined the ground thoroughly. There are no signs a battle ever took place there. I rest my case and Monica Schaefer's. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I told you. I'll take questions. Henry's on his way. Henry.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I guess I'll start. So I'm Jewish as well. And
It's the hairline that gives us away, right?
I guess, well, no, well, maybe.
Although look at Steven Pinker last time.
Yeah.
Like
So,
that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how to start because I'm not sure what the point of, maybe I'm wrong about the point of your talk, but I would like to maybe bring up a point that some of the things you said, I would like to say is, to me, a big lie. Okay. So you mentioned things like ethnic cleansing of the PA, right? So, and also you say that you're an outcast when it comes to other people, you know, and their opinions. But in fact, people like me are the outcast when it comes to opinions about Israel. And I think saying things like ethnic cleansing of the PA is one of the great big lies, where in fact the opposite is true. 20% of Israel is Arabic, Muslim. 0% of all the countries around Israel is Jewish. Not 1 or 2 Jews, but 0. That is a big number, 0. There are 0 Jews in Gaza. There are 0 Jews under Abbas in the West Bank. There are 0 Jews in Jordan. There are 0 Jews in Syria. There are 0 Jews in Lebanon. There are 5 Jews left in Egypt. There are 0 Jews in Iraq, 0 Jews in Libya, 0 Jews in Yemen. So, to state something like ethnic cleansing and to throw it on Israel when it was a war in 48 and things happen in war. I think the big lie is that we're now, 75 years or something after 48. So I'm one of these people who I guess I'm a poster child for the COHS, a child of Holocaust survivors. And after the Second World War, there were 40 million refugees without a country. And of all these people, they all got settled somewhere in the world, except for the Palestinians. What they've done in the last 70 years is spent their time attacking, not Israel, attacking Jews in Israel. And this is the way some people see the truth. And rather than this big lie of slandering Israel. And the other thing, you mentioned things like, I'll just mention one more thing about like climate denier. You should know that it's not climate denier, it's climate Holocaust denier. That's how it started. It started with Al Gore. He actually said climate Holocaust denier. And it just, people sort of forget that word. Okay, I'll stop there, but, and also I guess one more thing about comparing Warsaw with the way Jews are treating Palestinians in Israel is just beyond the pale. You haven't met somebody who survived Warsaw. I grew up talking to these people.
Thanks, Henry. Well, there's a lot there, right? And rightly so. I was mentioning, I forget to whom, just about a half an hour ago, that one of my, you all know who Henry Morgenthaler is, I take it, right? And coincidentally, his daughter, Goldie Morgenthaler, is, I think she hasn't, I'm not sure if she's retired yet, but anyhow, she was a prof in the English department just down the hall, right, from me. I'm in philosophy, she's in English. And she is, of course, both of her parents, I met both of her parents. Both of them survived Auschwitz. Both of them have numbers on them. They're dead now, but only recently. And she and I had a bit of a contretemps one time, because there was a Holocaust exhibit, which is a weird word, but anyhow, at the Galt Museum, which is the museum in Lethbridge, the city where I live. So they wanted to have, they were trying to get somebody from the Jewish community who could then explain to their curators and also to their volunteer curators, right, people who would walk visitors through, about the Holocaust. So they went to the head of our Jewish community, a guy named Gary Kahn, And Gary said to the organizers, said, "Don't talk. Go get Dr. Viminitz, right? He knows his stuff." So they came to me. He said, "Would I do the honor of educating these people about?" And the question, of course, that I thought was important to educate them about is, not like, okay, the numbers and the, all of that stuff, right? Of that, show them pictures of the piles of boots and all that stuff that you can get from Yad Vashem, but rather, what the hell was going on such that something like that could happen, right? And and then they were apparently so impressed that they went to the director of the museum and they said, "Could you get Dr. Viminitz to give the opening address, the speech, where the community was invited to open the exhibit?" And they asked me, and I said, "Okay, of course." So I go, and I more or less repeated what I had said to these people. And Goldie and other members of the Jewish community, were very small in Lethbridge, were in the audience. She was furious with me. I mean, furious, foaming at the mouth, furious with me. Because what I said was, and among other things, I said, look, and again, part of this has to do with, you have to know Lethbridge, but Lethbridge is next door to Lethbridge is the biggest indigenous reserve in Canada. Okay, it's the size of several countries in Europe, which is huge, right? And so we have this huge indigenous population. And of course, those of you, if you know anything about Western Canada, will know that the indigenous people in Western Canada are not well treated and are not well regarded. And there's a park in downtown Lethbridge. People, non-indigenous people, if they want to get from this corner to the far corner, instead of going through the park, where there's this nice, which is occupied by indigenous people, right? They do the L all the way around, right? You can actually, watch this. Sociologists have actually watched this happen, right? So I said, what is it that you don't understand about the Holocaust? The Indian people the Indians, they smell different. They do, by the way. They smell different because they eat different food. They dress different. They speak a different language. Secret language, probably. They're talking to each other. They have different values. Right? Virtually zero employment, right? High alcoholism, et cetera, right? And they're panhandling and they harass you on your way through and so. I said, do you understand that? The Jews of Europe, right? They ate different food. They smell different. They talk their own secret language, right? Yiddish. They are immune. Europe was subject to a theocracy, Christian theocracy until very recently. To some degree still is. Jews were immune from that theocratic rule. God damn them. They don't have to, they can eat whatever they want on a Friday night. They don't have to eat fish. They don't have to follow these rules. They don't have to pay tithes and so on to the church and so on and so forth. A little bit like those Indians who get that, they don't have to pay taxes in Alberta. It goes on and on and on, right? I said, you're beginning to kind of get the picture here, right? And, people in the audience say, oh. Oh, okay. There's nothing about the German people, well, except maybe Christina. There's nothing about the German people, right? It's just part of human nature, to other, right? To be, uncomfortable with the other. So there's already, and then there's that whole history of usury, right? The fact that Jews could lend money, but Christians couldn't. Again, the theological insult that Jews turning to Christians saying, "Oh, you're so patting them on the head. Oh, you believe that the Messiah was supposed to be a spiritual." We knew differently. This political aspiration. There's all kinds of hostility, all kinds of stuff that is built up, right? She was furious with me. And it took us 15 years before, I had a car accident and she actually came to my door in the office and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." 15 years of hostility. So I'm used to the kind of alternative narrative that comes out of, okay, I mean, there's all kinds of narratives, right? There's an alternative narrative that comes out of precisely that kind of my bias. And in her case, it's the very fact that she really was the child of two Holocaust survivors who I met, right? And so she's really not in a position to kind of stand back and kind of like take a look at, for example, Sabra and Shatila. For those of you who don't know, 1982, Israel invades South Lebanon, goes all the way up to Beirut. There is a Palestinian refugee camp in the outskirts of Beirut. They turn to then the Phalange, by the way, are the Christian militia that the Israelis were supporting against the Muslim during that civil war. And Ariel Sharon turns to the Palestinian, to the Lebanese Phalange and says, "Do your worst." And the Phalange goes into Sabra Shatila and slaughters thousands of innocent, Palestinian refugees, children, old men, which of course is a war crime, and it's precisely why there was so much hostility about Ariel Sharon. So the thing is that in the Muslim mindset, and we're not just talking about the Palestinian mind, in the Muslim mindset, Sabra Shatila performed the same role in their understanding of the world as does the Holocaust, Auschwitz, plays in the minds of Jews and Christians alike. So it's not that I don't understand what you're saying, Henry. I do.
I think you don't, because Shannon sued Time Magazine because of the slander that you're saying. He actually won.
And so it goes, right? I mean, that's it's that kind of.
Because a lot of people, reality is exactly, if a Jew defends himself, just as what happened with the reporter just got shot.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
If a Jew defends himself, it's a war crime. That's exactly what the world does for Jews.
I'm going to call on Bruce now, just so we get some. I thought Bruce was standing here. Boris.
He was. He left, I don't know what. Very intriguing and thought-provoking. I still wonder ultimately what you're trying to say here. You used the word narratives. And you used it in a way that suggested to me that what we have are competing narratives. The implication being, I think, that there is no narrative as such that is superior, or no basis perhaps on which to distinguish between better and worse narratives. Or at least, even if there is such a basis, at the top of the pyramid, you might say, there are still a number of competing narratives amongst which we're unable to decide. Raises in my mind the question, is it true that for you all the histories written thus far are essentially works of poetry masquerading as history? And if so, does that mean that there is no such thing as history? Ultimately, it's all just poetry. If you want to put it in Platonic terms, can we ever make an ascent out of the cave? Or do we accede to Wittgenstein's idea that there is only the cave?
Right.
There are only forms of life, and there's no way of deciding amongst them which is the better.
Okay, if I subscribe to that view, that would make me a continental philosopher, and then I'd have to kill myself, okay? So no, I do not. The point I'm trying to make is simply this. It's that we do ourselves a disservice by deciding that there's no need to listen to the Weltanschauung, the worldview of those people that oppose us. There is a need to do that. What you need to do is you need to understand that these people, right, people of that ilk, that we regard of that ilk, they regard us of a particular ilk, right? And the thing is that no progress is going to be made other than brute force, which ultimately I suppose we have to revert to if need be. I'd like to avoid that. We could probably do a lot of good by just sitting down and listening. How is it that you perceive? How is it that you perceive what's going on? Okay. And this business of, oh, well, look, all I have to do is educate you, right? All I have to do is educate you about global warming, or all I have to do is educate you about, vaccination safety, or the Holocaust, or whatever the case may be, right? And that doesn't go very far, because as Steven Pinker was pointing out, people are committed to the conclusion, not the arguments for the conclusion, right? But what we really want to do, what I'm advocating, is that, and this is why we have this dinner before COVID. We call it "Guess Who's Coming to Dinner," where you invite the most repulsive human being on the planet you can possibly think of, given what positions they take. You invite them to dinner, break bread together, and find out. Okay, so what is it that you're thinking that makes that makes you push in this particular way? And you ask yourself, well, like, what's the point of the talk? The point of the talk is that it's not that don't be skeptical about history or skeptical about. That's not the point of the talk. It's to understand that other people regard you the same way you regard them, and with exactly the same justification. You pick your experts, right? You pick your community of trust. In the same way that I have, in the same way that we all have, they do the same thing. Monica Schaefer is as epistemically warranted as I am, which is not to say that she's right or that there's no fact of the matter, but there is a fact of the matter about the Holocaust, and quite frankly, I believe, I was raised on stories about the Holocaust just as you were, so it's not that I'm denying that there are superior narratives. The problem is, it doesn't help to claim the narrative high ground with your interlocutors. It's not helping. It's so hard for us to understand that they view us the way we view them. That's hard to get your brain around. And I guess that's the purpose of the talk, to answer.
May I quickly? Just very quickly.
Oh, okay. Very quickly.
Thank you. So would the point then be to enter into conversation, not just to talk, but to listen with those who have a very different narrative, with a view to what? Arriving hopefully at a better, higher narrative?
Probably
that
not.
Both of us can agree to? Is that how reason figures into it? Or
Take the vitriol out of the conversation. That's the point. Once you take the vitriol out of the conversation, right, then it becomes much more difficult to be belligerent in your behavior towards the other. So I don't have the kind of, like Peter, I don't have the kind of Steven Pinker optimism that, if we just talk together, we'll settle it, we'll come to some consensus. I don't have that.
Ava will ask the last question, and then we'll go to lunch.
Actually, I'm not going to ask a question. I'm
Go ahead,
going to
Ava.
make a small statement. I agree with your conclusion and the premise that, we have to listen to everybody. But, and this was a comment I wanted to make in the previous one, while we're doing that, we don't always know if we're telling the truth or not, but we have to, in science particularly, always seek the truth. We have to believe that there is a truth to be sought. I want to support the gentleman over there in the corner.
Henry, yeah.
Henry. I think you just said that you don't take the vitriol out. I think you made your point by putting as much vitriol in as you could possibly put. And that's my statement.
A response, Paul?
It's not a response I haven't heard before, right? I guess it's really, it really comes down to understanding that a man's actions proceedeth from his opinions. Okay? But we can't control a person's opinions. We have a lot more control over a person's actions, and a person's actions are going to be far more influenced by the sentiment that human being has towards me or I have towards him or her than it will be by the arguments. This is a very sad and disappointing thing to be said by a philosopher, right? But it's something that over the course of my many and far too many years that I have learned is that argumentation doesn't do as much as breaking bread with someone. Break bread. I should have just called the talk Break Bread, right? Anyhow, that's my response.
Thank you, Paul. Join me in thanking Paul for his talk, and we'll go for lunch.
And thank you to both Henry and to Ava for calling me on the carpet on this. That's exactly what, what I like to do. Okay.